You are being lied to. Right now. Today. This week. In ways both small and devastating. In ways that cost you money, time, trust, and peace of mind. The person sitting across from you at dinner, telling you they're fine when their eyes say otherwise. The colleague who promises support while already planning to take credit for your work. The salesperson who swears this is the best deal you'll find, knowing full well it isn't. The friend who borrows money with earnest promises of repayment, already aware they have no intention of paying you back. The romantic partner who looks you in the eye and tells you nothing happened, while their body screams the opposite truth. Deception is the invisible language spoken all around you, every single day. And if you cannot read it, you are navigating life with a blindfold on. Think about the last time someone lied to you. Really lied. Not a polite social fiction about liking your haircut. A real lie. One that mattered. One that changed something. Do you remember the moment you discovered the truth? That sickening drop in your stomach. The way the ground seemed to shift beneath your feet. The instant replay that flooded your mind, rewatching every conversation, every interaction, searching for the signs you missed. They were there. They were always there. You just didn't see them. And then comes the second wave, the self-doubt, the brutal questions you ask yourself in the dark. How did I not know? How could I be so blind? What else have I missed? Who else is lying to me right now? This is the cost of operating without the ability to detect deception. It is not just the immediate pain of betrayal. It is the erosion of your ability to trust yourself. It is the fortress you build around your heart because you cannot tell friend from fraud. It is the opportunities you miss because you cannot read the room. It is the toxic relationships that drain years from your life because you kept believing the promises instead of reading the patterns. The financial cost alone is staggering. The business deal that seemed perfect until you discovered the hidden liability. The investment opportunity that was actually a sophisticated con. The contractor who quoted one price and delivered another. The employer who described a company culture that turned out to be fiction. Every year, billions upon billions of dollars change hands based on lies that could have been detected if someone had known what to look for. But the deeper cost is emotional. It is the mother who believes her teenager's excuses until the addiction is undeniable. The spouse who accepts explanations for late nights until infidelity shatters the marriage. The friend who trusts a confidant until their secrets become public gossip. The employee who believes in a mentor until the sabotage is complete. Each deception leaves a mark, a small crack in your foundation. And over time, these cracks compound. You become either paranoid, suspecting everyone, unable to form genuine connections. Or you become numb, refusing to see red flags because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging how many times you have been fooled before. You start selecting for the wrong people. The liars are often the most charming, the most convincing, the most skilled at telling you exactly what you want to hear. And because you cannot read the invisible language, you let them in. You promote them. You marry them. You invest with them. You confide in them. While the genuine people, the truthful ones who lack polished deception skills, seem less impressive by comparison. This is what it means to be blind to deception. You are not just missing lies. You are building a life on a foundation of sand, never quite sure what is real and what is performance. But here is what most people do not know. What nobody tells you. What changes everything. You already have the ability to detect lies. Your brain is designed for pattern recognition. It is how you survived as a species. Your ancestors who could read facial expressions, who could detect inconsistency, who could sense when something was off, they lived long enough to pass their genes to you. This ability is not mystical. It is not a gift reserved for FBI agents and poker players and psychologists. It is built into your neural architecture. The problem is not that you lack the hardware. The problem is that nobody taught you how to use it. You have been moving through life with a sophisticated lie detection system that has never been properly calibrated. You have instincts you have been trained to ignore, gut feelings you have been taught to dismiss, pattern recognition abilities you have never learned to trust. And that ends now, because what you are about to learn is not theory. It is not philosophy. It is a systematic method for training your brain to see what it has been missing, to read the invisible language, to detect deception with increasing accuracy and confidence. By the time you finish this journey, you will possess a heightened awareness that transforms every human interaction. You will notice the micro-expressions that flash across faces in fractions of a second. You will hear the linguistic patterns that separate memory from fabrication. You will feel the subtle shifts in energy when someone moves from truth to deception. You will walk into a room and read it. You will sit across from someone and know. Not with absolute certainty. There are no guarantees in human behavior, but with calibrated confidence, with enough accuracy to protect yourself, to make better decisions, to build a life based on reality instead of illusion. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine sitting in a job interview and knowing, truly knowing, whether the promises being made about company culture and growth opportunities are genuine or performance. Imagine the business deals you would walk away from, the relationships you would never begin, the investments you would never make. Imagine looking at your romantic partner and being able to distinguish between the stress of a hard day and the stress of hiding something. Imagine the conversations you would have earlier, the problems you would address before they became crises, the trust you would build through honest communication instead of polite avoidance. Imagine parenting with the ability to tell when your child is lying about where they were, who they were with, what they were doing. Not to punish, but to guide, to intervene, to protect them from consequences they are too young to foresee. Imagine moving through life with quiet certainty, not arrogance, not paranoia, just clear-eyed assessment. You extend trust, but you verify. You hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. You give people chances, but you watch for patterns. This is not about becoming cynical. It is about becoming wise. This is not about suspecting everyone. It is about seeing clearly. This is not about building walls. It is about building discernment. And the most beautiful part, the people who are genuine, the ones who tell the truth, the ones who are exactly who they claim to be, they will feel it. They will sense that you see them clearly and that you choose to trust them anyway. Your relationships with truthful people will deepen. Your bonds with authentic humans will strengthen. Because trust based on clear sight is infinitely more powerful than trust based on blind hope. Meanwhile, the liars, the manipulators, the deceivers, they will sense it too. Something in your energy will shift. The way you hold eye contact, the questions you ask, the pauses you allow, the patterns you notice. They will realize, often unconsciously, that you are not an easy mark, and they will move on to someone else, someone who still believes that deception is impossible to detect, You will become a person who attracts truth and repels deception simply by upgrading your perception. This is the promise. This is the transformation waiting for you, and it begins with understanding a fundamental truth. Lie detection is not magic. It is a skill, a trainable, improvable, masterable skill rooted in pattern recognition. The same neural pathways that allow you to recognize faces in a crowd, to anticipate the next note in a familiar song, to know something feels wrong before you can articulate why. These are the pathways you will strengthen. Your brain already does this. It already picks up thousands of micro-signals in every conversation. The problem is that most of this processing happens below conscious awareness. The data gets flagged as a vague gut feeling, and then you talk yourself out of trusting it. What you are about to learn is how to bring that processing into conscious awareness, how to slow down and examine what your unconscious mind already knows, how to train your attention to catch the tells you have been missing, how to build a systematic method for increasing your accuracy from barely above chance to reliable, actionable insight. This journey will take you from innocence to mastery, from being deceived without knowing it to detecting deception with confidence, from doubting your instincts to trusting refined intuition, from feeling foolish after discovering a lie to catching it in real time. You will learn the science behind why people lie and how lying changes speech, movement, and physiology. You will discover the specific patterns that separate truth from fabrication. You will practice techniques for establishing baselines and watching for deviations. You will understand how to read micro-expressions, analyze language, and ask strategic questions that increase cognitive load for liars. And you will integrate this into your identity, not as something you try to do, but as something you are. A person who sees clearly, who chooses wisely, who builds a life aligned with reality. So take a breath. This is where it begins. This is where you stop being lied to without knowing it. This is where you claim the ability that has always been yours. Welcome to the invisible language. Welcome to the training your brain has been waiting for. Welcome to seeing what others miss. You know the feeling. That moment when the truth finally surfaces and suddenly everything makes sense. All those small inconsistencies you dismissed. All those explanations that seemed reasonable at the time, but now look absurd in hindsight. All those moments when something felt off, but you talked yourself out of trusting your instincts. She said she was working late, again. And you believed her because you wanted to believe her. Because suspecting the person you love feels like betraying them. Because accusing someone of lying without proof makes you the bad guy. So you ignored the new password on her phone, the way she angled the screen away from you, the unexplained charge on the credit card she explained away with a story you didn't quite follow, but didn't question either. You dismissed the fact that her stories about work never quite added up, that the colleague she mentioned on Monday had a different name by Friday, that she came home smelling different, that her eyes wouldn't meet yours when you asked simple questions, that she started picking fights over nothing, creating distance, manufacturing reasons to be angry with you. Each inconsistency was small. Individually, they meant nothing. You could explain them all away. Stress at work, forgetfulness, a weird coincidence. You are not a paranoid person. You are not a jealous person. You trust. You believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt, until the day you couldn't ignore it anymore. The day the evidence became undeniable. The day the truth crashed down and revealed that every instinct you suppressed was right. Every small inconsistency was a breadcrumb. Every dismissed red flag was a warning you ignored. And the betrayal hurts. Of course it does. But what cuts deeper is the betrayal of yourself. The realization that you knew. On some level, you knew. Your body knew. Your unconscious mind knew. But you chose not to see. Or consider the business deal, the partnership that was going to change everything. The investor who seemed so professional, so credible, so enthusiastic about your vision. You sat across the table from them, and they painted a picture of mutual success. They used all the right language. They seemed to understand your industry. They made promises about support and resources and connections. You wanted it to be true. You needed it to be true. So when the contract arrived, and it was 50 pages of dense legal language, you skimmed it. You told yourself that all contracts look intimidating, that this is just standard business practice, that successful people trust their partners. You missed the clause that gave them majority control after the first year. You missed the section about intellectual property that basically handed them ownership of your work. You missed the termination terms that left you with nothing if they decided to end the partnership. You missed all of it because you were reading what you wanted to see instead of what was actually there. And they knew. The whole time they were making promises across the table, they knew what was buried in that contract. They knew you wouldn't read it carefully. They knew you would sign because you wanted to believe. They counted on it. 6 months later, when they exercised those clauses and you lost everything you built, the anger was crushing. But again, worse than the anger was the humiliation. The way you sat with that contract afterward, reading what you should have read before, seeing how obvious it all was. The way you had to admit to yourself that the signs were there and you ignored them. Then there is the friend, the one who needed help. Just alone, just temporary. They had a story, a great story, compelling and detailed and emotionally resonant. They explained exactly why they needed the money and exactly when they would pay it back. They even got a little offended when you hesitated, as if your caution was an insult to the friendship. So you gave them the money. Because that is what friends do. Because you believed the story. Because the alternative, that someone you care about would lie to your face and take advantage of your kindness, seemed too cynical to consider. The first missed payment came with another great story, another compelling reason. Just a little more time. You understood. You were patient. You were a good friend. The second missed payment came with defensiveness, with anger that you even brought it up, with accusations that you cared more about money than friendship. Suddenly you were the villain for expecting them to keep their word. The third missed payment never came. They just stopped responding, stopped answering calls, unfollowed you on social media, disappeared with your money and your trust, and you are left sitting with the loss. Not just the financial loss, though, that stings, but the loss of the friendship, the loss of your ability to trust your judgment about people, the replaying of every conversation, looking for the tells you missed. They were there. The way they made the request urgent, pressuring you to decide quickly, the way they offered too many details, over-explaining, the way they got defensive when you asked reasonable questions. You missed it all. Or the job interview, the one where they sold you on the company culture, flexible hours, supportive management, room for growth, work-life balance. They used all the buzzwords. They smiled warmly. They made you feel valued and wanted. You asked about turnover. They had an answer. You asked about advancement opportunities. They had an answer. You asked about the last person in this role. They had an answer. Every answer sounded good. Every answer made sense. Every answer was exactly what you wanted to hear. 3 months into the job, you realized none of it was true. The flexible hours were a myth. The supportive management was micromanagement disguised as mentorship. The room for growth was a ceiling you hit immediately. The work-life balance was 60-hour weeks and weekend emails. You watched colleagues burn out and quit. You discovered that the last person in your role left after a breakdown. You learned that turnover was so high they were constantly hiring because people kept leaving once they saw behind the curtain. And you felt stupid, naive, foolish, because you believed them. Because you wanted the job so badly that you didn't press harder. You didn't ask to speak to current employees. You didn't research the company beyond their polished website. You didn't notice that the interviewer avoided specifics and spoke in vague, positive generalities. This is what operating without lie detection skills looks like. It is not one catastrophic failure. It is 1,000 small deceptions that compound over time. It is the erosion of your ability to trust yourself, to trust others, to navigate the world with confidence. Because after you have been deceived enough times, something shifts. You start to doubt everything. Every kind gesture seems suspicious. Every promise feels like a setup. Every relationship feels fragile, like it is only a matter of time before the truth comes out and reveals that this person, too, has been lying. You become paranoid. You interrogate people. You look for hidden meanings in innocent statements. You test people, setting little traps to see if they are honest. You push away genuine connections because you cannot tell the difference between authenticity and performance. Or you go the other direction. You shut down the alarm system entirely. You stop trusting your instincts because they have been wrong before, or so you tell yourself. You ignore red flags because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging how many times you have been deceived. You stay in bad relationships, bad jobs, bad friendships because leaving would require admitting you were wrong to enter them in the first place. Either way, you lose. Either you live in constant suspicion, unable to form real bonds, or you live in willful blindness, repeatedly selecting untrustworthy people and wondering why your life keeps falling apart. And here is the pattern you probably haven't noticed yet. The pattern that runs underneath all of these stories. You keep attracting the same type of people. The liars, the manipulators, the ones who are skilled at telling you what you want to hear. They find you. They sense something in your energy, in the way you engage, in the questions you do not ask. They recognize someone who wants to believe, someone who will dismiss inconsistencies, someone who will give the benefit of the doubt long past the point where doubt should be certainty. Meanwhile, the genuine people, the honest ones, they often seem less impressive. They do not make grand promises. They do not tell elaborate stories. They do not sell themselves with polished charisma. They are just consistently, quietly themselves. And because you have been conditioned to respond to performance rather than substance, you overlook them. You choose the charming liar over the awkward truth-teller. You invest in the smooth-talking fraud over the genuine but unpolished opportunity. You hire the candidate who interviews well over the one who is competent but modest. You date the person who sweeps you off your feet with romantic gestures over the one who shows up consistently without fanfare. This is the hidden cost. Not just the lies you fail to detect, but the truths you fail to recognize. The opportunities you miss because you cannot distinguish between confident deception and humble authenticity. The relationships you never build because you are drawn to the wrong signals. Your career suffers. You work for liars. You partner with frauds. You miss opportunities because you cannot read the room, cannot tell when an offer is genuine or when someone is stringing you along. You waste years in positions that were never going to lead where they promised. Your finances suffer. You invest in schemes that sounded good. You lend money you will never see again. You pay for services that were misrepresented. You trust financial advisors who prioritize their commission over your well-being. You sign contracts without seeing the trap. Your parenting suffers. You cannot tell when your child is lying about homework, about friends, about where they were and what they were doing. You miss the early signs of trouble because you want to believe everything is fine. You discover problems only after they have become crises. Your friendships suffer. You confide in people who betray your trust. You invest in relationships that are one-sided. You keep giving to people who only take. You cannot tell who genuinely cares and who is using you for what you can provide. Your intimate relationships suffer most of all. You choose partners based on chemistry and promises instead of consistency and character. You stay with people who are hurting you because you believe their apologies and their claims that things will change. You ignore evidence of incompatibility or dishonesty because you are attached to the version of them they present, not the reality of who they are. And underneath all of it, beneath every failed relationship and bad decision and financial loss and career setback, is the erosion of self-trust. You stop believing in your own judgment. You second-guess every decision. You ask everyone else for advice because you cannot trust yourself to see clearly. You become dependent on external validation because your internal compass feels broken. You live in a fog of uncertainty, never quite sure what is real, never quite confident in your assessments, always wondering if you are missing something, always bracing for the moment when the truth will be revealed and you will feel foolish again. This is the weight. This is the cost. This is what it means to move through life without the ability to detect deception. It is not dramatic. It is not a single catastrophic event. It is the slow accumulation of missed signals and dismissed instincts and deceptions you discovered too late. It is the compounding effect of selecting for the wrong people and missing opportunities for genuine connection. It is the quiet desperation of never quite knowing who to trust, including yourself. And it does not have to be this way. But before you can upgrade your ability to detect deception, you need to understand why you have been missing the signs. And here is the truth that will lift the weight of shame from your shoulders. You are not gullible. You are not naive. You are not stupid. You are human. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is that it was designed for a world that no longer exists. For hundreds of thousands of years, human survival depended on cooperation. Your ancestors lived in small groups where everyone knew everyone, where reputation mattered, where lying carried enormous social cost. If someone in your tribe of 50 people deceived you, everyone would know. They would be ostracized. They would lose the protection and resources of the group. In that environment, lying was rare because the consequences were severe. So your brain evolved with what researchers call truth bias, a default assumption that other people are telling the truth. This was not a flaw. It was a feature. It allowed groups to function. It enabled trust. It made cooperation possible. If your ancestors had approached every interaction with suspicion, constantly questioning whether their hunting partner was lying or their neighbor was trustworthy, the social fabric would have shattered, communities would have fractured, survival would have been impossible. Your brain inherited this bias. Deep in your neural wiring is the assumption that people are generally honest, that statements should be taken at face value unless there is overwhelming evidence otherwise. That trust should be the default, not skepticism. This served humanity beautifully for millennia. But then the world changed. Now you live in a society of millions, of strangers, of people you will never see again, of interactions where reputation does not matter and consequences are minimal. The social mechanisms that kept lying in check, they no longer exist. Someone can deceive you and disappear into a city of 8 million people. A company can mislead you and hide behind corporate structures and legal protections. A politician can lie to millions and face no real accountability. The environment changed, but your brain did not. You are still operating with software designed for a tribe of 50, trying to navigate a world of billions. And modern society knows this. Modern society weaponizes your truth bias. Advertising is built on exploiting your assumption that claims are honest. Commercials show you images of happy families and beautiful people and amazing experiences, and link them to products that have nothing to do with those feelings. They make claims that are technically legal, but fundamentally misleading. They know you will not fact-check. They know you will absorb the emotional message, even if the rational part of your brain knows it is manipulation. Political messaging does the same. Politicians make promises they have no intention of keeping. They create narratives that sound compelling, but crumble under scrutiny. They speak in vague, emotionally resonant language that means nothing concrete. And they know most people will not dig deeper, will not demand specifics, will hear what they want to hear and fill in the gaps with their own hopes. Social manipulation happens constantly. Salespeople are trained to build false rapport, to mirror your body language, to use your name repeatedly to create artificial intimacy, to pressure you with false scarcity and fake urgency. They know that if they can get you to like them, you will be less likely to question them. Your truth bias will kick in. You will want to believe the person you like. This is the first reason you miss the signs. Your brain is wired to believe, and the world is full of people who exploit that wiring. But there is another reason, one that is even more powerful in the moment. Cognitive load. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for critical thinking and pattern recognition, has limited resources. It can only handle so much at once, and when it is overwhelmed, your ability to detect deception collapses. Think about the last time you were stressed, really stressed. Deadline pressure, financial worry, relationship conflict, health concerns. In that state, how clearly were you thinking? How carefully were you analyzing conversations? How much attention were you paying to inconsistencies in what people were saying? You were not. Because your prefrontal cortex was maxed out managing the stress, and in that state, you defaulted to shortcuts. You accepted explanations at face value. You didn't have the mental bandwidth to question, to analyze, to notice the subtle tells. This is why scammers often create urgency, why manipulators pick moments when you are tired or distracted or emotionally overwhelmed. They know that a stressed brain is a gullible brain. That cognitive load destroys your ability to think critically. Distraction does the same thing. When you are multitasking, checking your phone, thinking about your to-do list, you are not fully present. You are not tracking the conversation carefully enough to notice when someone's story shifts, when their body language contradicts their words, when the details do not add up. Your brain can either focus on the content of what someone is saying, or it can focus on how they are saying it, and whether it is consistent. It cannot do both at full capacity simultaneously. So when you are distracted or stressed, you default to content. You hear the words. You miss the meta-communication. And then there is emotional investment. This is perhaps the most powerful blind spot of all. When you care about someone, when you have built your life around them, when you need to believe they are who they claim to be, your brain actively filters out contradictory information. This is not weakness. This is biology. Your brain is protecting you from cognitive dissonance, the psychological pain of holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. It is easier to dismiss one piece of evidence than to restructure your entire understanding of a person or situation. So when your romantic partner shows signs of deception, your brain minimizes them. It generates alternative explanations. It tells you that you are being paranoid. It finds reasons to doubt your own perception rather than doubt the person you love. This is confirmation bias in action. Your brain seeks information that supports what you already believe and dismisses information that contradicts it. If you believe your partner is faithful, you will notice all the evidence that supports that belief and explain away all the evidence against it. If you believe a business opportunity is legitimate, you will focus on the promises and overlook the red flags. The more emotionally invested you are, the stronger this bias becomes. The more you need something to be true, the less capable you are of seeing evidence that it is not. This is why you can often see clearly when it is someone else's relationship, someone else's business deal, someone else's situation. You have no emotional investment. Your brain is free to process the information objectively. But when it is your life, your choice, your person, objectivity becomes nearly impossible. Then there is socialization. The rules you were taught about politeness and trust. You were raised to believe that accusing someone of lying is one of the rudest things you can do. That questioning someone's honesty is an attack on their character. That good people give others the benefit of the doubt. That suspicion is a moral failing. So even when your instincts scream that something is wrong, you suppress them. You stay quiet. You talk yourself out of it. Because naming the lie feels worse than enduring it. You were taught that trust is a virtue, and it is. But you were not taught the difference between wise trust and blind trust. You were not taught that verification is not the same as suspicion. You were not taught that it is possible to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. So when you feel that gut instinct, that sense that something is off, you dismiss it as negativity, as cynicism, as being a bad person. You silence the very alarm system that is trying to protect you. And making all of this worse is the misinformation about lie detection itself. You have been taught myths that actively decrease your accuracy. You have been told that liars avoid eye contact, that they fidget, that they touch their face, that they look up and to the left when accessing memory. None of this is reliable. None of this is scientifically supported. And focusing on these false tells makes you miss the real ones. Some liars maintain intense eye contact because they know people expect them to look away. Some truth-tellers avoid eye contact because they are anxious or shy or culturally conditioned not to stare. Some people fidget constantly, whether they are lying or not. Some people are perfectly still when lying because they are consciously controlling their body language. The myths about body language assume everyone responds the same way to the stress of deception. But people are different. Nervous systems are different. Cultural backgrounds are different. What looks like a deception tell in one person is just normal behavior in another. And then there are polygraphs, the lie detector machines that people believe are infallible. They are not. They measure physiological arousal, not deception. They cannot tell the difference between the stress of lying and the stress of being accused, between guilt and fear, between deception and anxiety. Innocent people fail polygraphs regularly. Guilty people pass them by, learning to control their breathing and heart rate. The scientific community has known for decades that polygraphs are unreliable, yet they persist in the public imagination as truth machines. So you were taught to look for the wrong signs, to trust the wrong tools, to believe in markers of deception that do not actually indicate deception. And while you were focused on whether someone made eye contact, you missed the linguistic patterns that matter, the changes in speech rhythm, the shifts in verb tense, the overuse of convincing phrases. All of these factors combine truth bias, cognitive load, emotional investment, socialization, misinformation. They layer on top of each other, creating a perfect storm of blind spots. And in the middle of it all is you, trying your best, wanting to trust, wanting to believe the best in people, wanting to build a life based on connection and hope. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human. But it also makes you vulnerable. Because while you are operating with outdated software, others have upgraded. The skilled liars, the practiced manipulators, the people who have studied how to exploit truth bias and create cognitive load and weaponize your emotions against you. They know what they are doing. They have systems. They have techniques. They know how to tell a lie that sounds like truth, how to create a story with just enough detail to seem real, but not so much detail that inconsistencies become obvious, how to use your politeness against you, how to make you doubt your own instincts. And unless you upgrade your own software, unless you understand how your brain has been working against your best interests, you will keep missing the signs. But here is the beautiful thing. Now that you understand why you have been missing the signs, you can start to compensate. Now that you know about truth bias, you can consciously question your assumptions. Now that you know about cognitive load, you can recognize when your thinking is compromised and delay important decisions. Now that you know about emotional investment creating blind spots, you can seek outside perspectives when you are too close to see clearly. Understanding the root cause does not just explain the past. It illuminates the path forward. You are not broken. Your brain is not defective. You are simply operating with factory settings designed for a different world. And those settings can be adjusted. Those patterns can be retrained. That software can be upgraded. The shame you have been carrying, the feeling that you should have known better, it can be released now. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had. You were working against evolutionary wiring, cognitive limitations, and cultural conditioning. But now you know. Now you see the invisible forces that have been shaping your perception. Now you can begin the real work of developing the skills your brain is capable of, but has never been trained to use. This is not about becoming paranoid. It is not about losing your ability to trust. It is about adding discernment to your trust, adding awareness to your openness, adding pattern recognition to your natural desire to believe in people. Your truth bias does not have to disappear. It just needs to be balanced with verification. Your emotional investment does not have to vanish. It just needs to be tempered with objectivity. Your politeness doesn't have to be abandoned. It just needs to be paired with boundaries, You can still be the person who hopes for the best. You can just also become the person who sees clearly. And now that you understand why the signs have been invisible, you need to understand where you are in the journey. Because mastery of lie detection is not binary. You do not go from blind to seeing overnight. You progress through stages, and knowing which stage you are in helps you understand what comes next. Think of this as a map, a way to locate yourself on the path from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence, from being deceived without awareness to detecting deception automatically. Most people begin in the first stage, the stage you might recognize from your past, the stage where deception happens all around you, and you have no idea. This is the innocent stage. In this stage, you accept information at face value. Someone tells you something, and you believe it. Not because you have verified it. Not because you have analyzed their credibility. Simply because they said it, and you have no reason to doubt. You are not looking for inconsistencies, because it does not occur to you that there might be inconsistencies. You are not watching for behavioral changes, because you assume behavior is stable and honest. You are not analyzing language patterns, because you take words at their intended meaning. When deception is revealed in this stage, it feels like being hit by a truck. Complete shock, total disbelief, the ground falling out from under you. You replay every conversation, every interaction, looking for clues, and you find them everywhere. How did I miss that? It was so obvious. The signs were there the whole time. But they were not obvious to you then, because you were not looking, because it did not occur to you to look. This stage is not stupidity. It is innocence. It is operating with the assumption that people generally tell the truth, that the world is basically honest, that deception is the exception, not a common occurrence you need to guard against. Many people live their entire lives in this stage. They get deceived repeatedly, and each time they are shocked. Each time they cannot believe someone would lie to them. Each time they are blindsided because they returned to baseline innocence between incidents. You have probably been in this stage. Maybe you are in it now regarding certain areas of your life. Maybe there are domains where you still accept things at face value, where it has not occurred to you that verification might be necessary. Look back at the deceptions you have experienced, the ones that shocked you, the ones where you felt completely blindsided. Those happened when you were in the innocent stage. But once you have been deceived enough times, once the shock has happened enough, something shifts. You move into the second stage, and this stage is, in many ways, harder than the first. This is the suspicious stage. In this stage, you become aware that lies exist, that people deceive, that you have been fooled before and could be fooled again. This awareness changes everything, but it does not yet give you the tools to navigate it. So you become hypervigilant, anxious. You start looking for deception everywhere. Every pause in conversation feels meaningful. Every avoided question feels like hiding something. Every inconsistency feels like proof of a lie. You over-attribute deception. You see lies where there are none. You accuse innocent people of dishonesty because your alarm system is turned up so high that it fires constantly. You create conflict in relationships by questioning everything. You push people away with your suspicion. Or you go the other direction. The anxiety of constant suspicion becomes unbearable, so you shut it down. You dismiss your gut feelings because they seem irrational. You talk yourself out of noticing red flags because you do not want to be paranoid. You under-attribute deception, missing obvious signs because you are overcorrecting away from hypervigilance. Either way, this stage is emotionally turbulent. You swing between extremes, between trusting too much and trusting too little, between ignoring your instincts and being controlled by them, between denial and paranoia. You lack calibration. You cannot tell the difference between genuine concern and irrational fear, between a real red flag and your own projection, between someone being stressed about something unrelated and someone hiding deception. This stage feels terrible. You question everything, including your own judgment. You do not know who to trust, especially yourself. You make accusations you regret. You miss lies you should have caught. You feel like you are getting worse at reading people, not better. Many people get stuck here. They recognize that deception exists, but never develop the skills to reliably detect it. So they either live in constant anxiety, never sure who is lying, or they retreat back to innocence, choosing blind trust over uncomfortable uncertainty. But if you push through, if you commit to actually learning rather than just worrying, you enter the third stage. And this is where real growth begins. This is the student stage. In this stage, you start learning the actual skills. You study pattern recognition. You learn about baselines and deviations. You practice noticing inconsistencies. You ask strategic questions. You watch for clusters of indicators rather than single tells. You approach conversations with conscious awareness. You are actively analyzing, watching, listening not just to what is said, but how it is said. Tracking whether someone's story remains consistent. Noticing if their body language matches their words. Paying attention to linguistic patterns. Sometimes you get it right. You notice the tells. You catch the lie. You ask the follow-up question that reveals the inconsistency. And it feels incredible. Validating, empowering. You saw something others missed. You trusted your analysis and it was correct. Sometimes you get it wrong. You think someone is lying and they are not. You miss a deception you should have caught. You overinterpret a behavior that meant nothing. And this hurts. It is frustrating. It makes you doubt whether you are learning anything at all. But here is what is actually happening in this stage. You are building a database. Every interaction, whether you read it correctly or not, is data. Every time you notice an inconsistency and check whether it meant something, you learn. Every time you miss a tell and later discover what you should have seen, you improve. This stage requires humility. You have to be willing to be wrong, to make mistakes, to confront your errors and learn from them instead of defending them. You have to treat every conversation as a learning opportunity rather than a test you must pass. You also have to manage your ego. In the innocent stage, you did not know what you did not know. In the suspicious stage, you thought your anxiety meant awareness. But in the student stage, you start to realize how much there is to learn, how subtle the tells can be, how complex human behavior is, how easy it is to misread a situation. This can be discouraging. You thought understanding the basics would make you good at this, but the basics just reveal how much more there is to master. The key to progressing through this stage is deliberate practice. Not just having conversations, but actively practicing your observation skills, watching people, establishing baselines, noticing deviations, checking your hypotheses, learning from feedback. You watch interviews with the sound off to isolate visual tells. You listen to audio to focus on vocal patterns. You practice in low-stakes situations where you can verify later whether your read was accurate. You seek environments with immediate feedback, where lies are revealed quickly so you can calibrate. You study your mistakes. When you miss a lie, you go back and analyze what you should have noticed. When you falsely accuse, you examine what led you astray. You treat errors not as failures, but as essential data for refining your pattern recognition. And gradually, slowly, through hundreds and then thousands of interactions, you start to get better. Your accuracy increases. Your confidence grows. The conscious effort becomes less effortful. The analysis becomes faster, smoother, more automatic. And then, after enough practice, enough experience, enough refinement, you enter the fourth stage. This is the natural stage. In this stage, pattern recognition becomes automatic. You are no longer consciously analyzing every conversation. You are no longer thinking through the baseline deviation cluster process step by step. You are no longer using conscious effort to detect deception. It just happens. You talk to someone, and you know. Not with certainty, there are no guarantees, but with calibrated confidence. The same way you know when someone is happy or sad without consciously analyzing their facial expression. The same way you know when a room feels tense without consciously cataloging. Everyone's body language. Your unconscious mind has internalized thousands of patterns. It processes micro-expressions, linguistic tells, behavioral inconsistencies, and contextual factors faster than conscious thought. And it delivers the conclusion as instinct, as a feeling, as a quiet inner knowing. Reading deception feels effortless, like peripheral vision. You are not staring at it, analyzing it, working to see it. It is just there, present, obvious without being labored. You move through conversations with a kind of relaxed awareness. You are present with people, connecting genuinely. But simultaneously, in the background, your pattern recognition is running, tracking, comparing to baseline, flagging anomalies. When something is off, you notice. Not because you're trying to catch people lying, but because the inconsistency registers automatically, the way you would notice if someone suddenly started speaking in a different accent mid-sentence. You trust your instincts, but they are no longer the anxious instincts of the suspicious stage. They are refined instincts, backed by thousands of data points, calibrated by years of feedback. You know the difference between your own projection and genuine pattern recognition. You also know your limits. You know that even naturals are not infallible, that anyone can be deceived by a skilled liar, that context matters, that you can be wrong. So you verify when stakes are high. You seek additional information. You remain open to being incorrect. But you also know when to trust what you see, when the tells are clear, when the cluster is undeniable, when your gut feeling is backed by observable evidence, and you act accordingly, with confidence, with clarity, without second-guessing yourself into paralysis. In this stage, you move through life differently. You are not paranoid, but you are not naive. You extend trust, but you watch for whether it is honored. You give people chances, but you notice patterns. You remain open to connection while maintaining boundaries. People sense this shift in you, not consciously, but energetically. There is something about the way you hold eye contact, the way you pause after someone speaks, the questions you ask, the details you remember. Something that signals you are paying attention in a way most people are not. And the skilled liars, the practiced manipulators, they often move on. They sense, without quite understanding why, that you are not an easy mark, that their usual techniques will not work, that you see too clearly. Meanwhile, genuine people feel met by you, seen. They appreciate that you are actually listening, actually present, actually engaged. Your relationships with honest people deepen because they trust that you know who they are and choose them anyway. This is mastery, not perfection, not infallibility, but automatic, reliable, calibrated pattern recognition that operates in the background of your life, protecting you, guiding you, informing your decisions without dominating your experience. Progression through these stages is not automatic. It does not happen just by reading about lie detection. It does not happen just from being lied to repeatedly. It happens through deliberate practice, through conscious effort in the student stage, through thousands of repetitions, through learning from mistakes, through refining your instincts until they are trustworthy. Time alone does not create mastery. You can spend decades in the innocent stage or stuck in the suspicious stage. What creates mastery is intentional development, focused practice, active learning. And the beautiful thing is that you can start right now. Wherever you are in this progression, you can move forward. If you are in the innocent stage, awareness is the first step. If you are in the suspicious stage, learning actual skills replaces anxiety with competence. If you are in the student stage, continued practice moves you toward automaticity. The path is clear. The progression is predictable. The skills are learnable. What comes next is the method itself. So what is the method? What is the actual system that takes you from theory to practice, from understanding to application? It is simpler than you think, and more powerful than most people realize. It is called the baseline deviation cluster system. 3 steps, 3 principles, the foundation of reliable lie detection. Forget everything you have heard about eye contact and fidgeting and looking up and to the left. Forget the generic tells that supposedly apply to everyone. Forget the myth that there is a universal signal for deception. Because here is the truth. Everyone lies differently. Everyone has unique patterns. What looks like deception in one person is normal behavior in another. What seems like honesty in one context is performance in another. The only way to detect deception reliably is to know what normal looks like for this specific person, and then watch for when they deviate from that normal, and then confirm that deviation with multiple simultaneous indicators. Baseline, deviation, cluster. Let us start with the baseline. Step 1 is establishing what someone looks like when they are telling the truth, when they are relaxed, when they are talking about neutral topics that carry no stress, no stakes, no reason to deceive. You cannot know if someone is acting unusual unless you know what usual looks like for them. So when you first meet someone, or when you are about to discuss something important, you spend time observing them during casual conversation. You ask neutral questions. You talk about the weather, about their commute, about harmless topics that require no deception. And while you are talking, you are watching, not interrogating, not staring, just observing with relaxed attention. What is their typical eye contact? Some people maintain steady eye contact naturally. Others glance away frequently, thinking while looking, at the ceiling or out the window. Neither is inherently more honest. They are just different baselines. What is their speech rhythm? Some people speak quickly, words tumbling out in an enthusiastic rush. Others speak slowly, carefully choosing each word. Some people are verbose, telling long stories with tangential details. Others are economical, answering questions with minimal words. What are their gestures? Some people talk with their hands constantly, punctuating every sentence with movement. Others keep their hands still, folded or resting. Some people fidget, shifting position, tapping fingers, adjusting clothing. Others are naturally motionless. What are their verbal quirks? Do they use filler words like and like? Do they repeat themselves? Do they answer questions directly or circle around before landing on the point? Do they use first-person pronouns freely or speak more generally? What is their breathing pattern? Shallow or deep? Fast or slow? Does their breathing change when they talk versus when they listen? What is their baseline facial expression? Animated or neutral? Do they smile easily or maintain a more serious demeanor? All of this is data. All of this is the foundation you need before you can detect deviation. Here is an example. You are interviewing a job candidate. You spend the first 10 minutes on easy questions. Tell me about your commute today. How did you hear about this position? What do you like to do outside of work? During this time, you notice this person maintains moderate eye contact. They glance away when thinking, but return to meet your gaze when answering. They speak at a moderate pace, with occasional pauses to gather thoughts. They use their hands occasionally, but not excessively. They use I and me comfortably. They answer questions fully, but not excessively. Their baseline is relaxed engagement. Now you have something to compare against, or imagine your teenager comes home. Before you ask about the potentially sensitive topic, curfew or grades or where they were tonight, you talk about neutral things. You ask about their day at school, about what they ate for lunch, about the show they have been watching, and you notice. Your teenager normally speaks quickly, enthusiastically, makes lots of eye contact, uses expansive gestures, jumps from topic to topic with high energy. That is their baseline. Or consider meeting with a potential business partner. You spend time in small talk before diving into the deal, and you observe that this person speaks slowly, deliberately, makes intense, sustained eye contact, sits very still, chooses words carefully, rarely uses contractions. That is their baseline. Every person is different. Every baseline is unique. And this is why generic rules fail. If you were told that liars avoid eye contact, you would misread the person whose baseline is minimal eye contact. You would trust the liar who knows to maintain eye contact because they have heard the same myth. Establishing baseline takes time, 5 to 10 minutes minimum, longer if possible. The more data you gather about someone's normal patterns, the more accurately you can detect when those patterns change. And that brings us to step 2, deviation. Once you know what normal looks like, you watch for what changes when the topic shifts to something sensitive, something where deception might be present, something that carries stakes. You ask the job candidate about the gap in their resume, about why they left their last position, about their specific contributions to the projects they listed. You ask your teenager where they were tonight, who they were with, what time they left, and what time they arrived home. You ask the business partner about the financials, about previous deals that fell through, about references from past partners. And you watch, not for generic tells, for deviations from this person's baseline. Does the job candidate who made comfortable eye contact suddenly start looking away more? Or does the person who naturally looked away while thinking suddenly maintain rigid, unblinking eye contact? Does the teenager who spoke quickly and energetically suddenly slow down, becoming more careful with words? Or do they speed up even more, talking in a rush to get through the explanation? Does the business partner who sat still suddenly start shifting position, adjusting clothing, touching their face? Or does the person who normally gestured become unnaturally rigid and controlled? The direction of change matters less than the fact of change. Some people become more animated when lying. Others become more controlled. Some maintain intense eye contact. Others avoid it. The tell is not the behavior itself. The tell is that it is different from baseline. But here is the critical distinction. Not all deviations indicate deception. Stress creates behavioral changes too. When you ask someone about a sensitive topic, even if they are telling the truth, they might show stress indicators. Increased heart rate, faster breathing, tension. These are normal responses to discussing something emotionally charged or personally significant. The difference is that stress tells are general arousal, increased overall activation, maybe faster speech, more energy, visible nervousness. Deception tells are about cognitive load. Lying requires mental effort. Your brain has to suppress the truth, construct the lie, maintain consistency, monitor the listener's reaction, and remember what you said so you can keep the story straight later. This cognitive load creates specific patterns. Speech might slow down because thinking takes effort. Pauses become longer as the person constructs the next part of the story. Language becomes less specific, more distancing. Fewer first-person pronouns, more passive voice, fewer sensory details. The person who was naturally verbose might become strangely brief, wanting to get through the lie quickly without adding details that could create inconsistencies. The person who was economical might suddenly over-explain, adding too many unnecessary details to make the lie sound convincing. But even deviation is not enough on its own, because sometimes people have reasons to be stressed that have nothing to do with deception. Maybe the topic is legitimately difficult for them. Maybe they are worried about being misunderstood. Maybe they have trauma related to the subject. This is why you need step 3. Cluster. One deviation means nothing. It could be stress. It could be distraction. It could be random variation. It could be that they are worried you will think they are lying even though they are not. 2 deviations are interesting, but still not conclusive. 3 to 5 simultaneous deviations. Now you have something. Now the probability of deception becomes significant. This is the cluster principle. Multiple indicators happening at the same time, all pointing in the same direction. Let us return to the job candidate. You ask about why they left their last position, and you notice 5 changes from baseline. 1. They break eye contact more frequently than before. 2. Their speech slows down noticeably. 3. They start using distancing language, saying the company instead of we, the team instead of my team. 4. They increase their use of convincing phrases, honestly, to tell you the truth, believe me. 5. You catch a micro-expression, a flash of contempt before they settle into a polite smile. That is a cluster. That is not stress. That is deception. Or your teenager. You ask where they were tonight, and you observe a cluster. 1. They suddenly become more rigid, less animated than their baseline energy. 2. Their story has oddly specific irrelevant details. What song was playing on the radio, what color shirt their friend was wearing, details that feel inserted rather than naturally recalled. 3. They avoid using names, saying we went instead of me and Sarah went. 4. They add unnecessary convincing phrases, I swear, I promise, when those phrases were not in their baseline speech. 5. They touch their face repeatedly, a behavior absent from baseline. That cluster tells you more than any single indicator ever could. Or the business partner. You ask about the financials of their previous venture, and you see the cluster. 1. They shift from their baseline of direct answers to circular ones, talking around the question. 2. Their voice pitch rises slightly, a physiological stress response. 3. They start using more qualifiers, kind of, sort of, approximately, when before they spoke in definites. 4. Their hands, which were still at baseline, suddenly start moving, adjusting papers, touching their watch. 5. They change verb tense, slipping between past and present in ways that suggest construction rather than memory. Cluster. Multiple simultaneous deviations. This is what you look for. Let us walk through a real-world scenario in detail. Your friend asks to borrow money. You have established baseline during normal conversation. They usually speak moderately, make good eye contact, use I statements, gesture occasionally, have a relaxed demeanor. Now they are explaining why they need the money, and you notice the cluster. Deviation 1. They increase their use of, because over-justifying, when baseline answers did not require constant justification. Deviation 2. Their eye contact becomes either too intense or too avoidant, moving away from their moderate baseline. Deviation 3. They add timeline details that seem too precise. At exactly 4:30 I got the call, when natural memory is not usually that specific about irrelevant details. Deviation 4. They speak faster than baseline, rushing through the explanation. Deviation 5. They use passive constructions. The money was needed instead of active, I need the money. 5 deviations. A cluster. Your pattern recognition should be activated. Does this mean they are definitely lying? No. It means the probability is high enough that you should verify. Ask follow-up questions. Circle back to earlier parts of the story later and see if details remain consistent. Check facts that can be checked, or imagine a salesperson making a pitch. Baseline established during rapport building. Normally they speak with moderate enthusiasm, make comfortable eye contact, use specific examples, speak in first person about their experience with the product. Then you ask about the success rate, about customer satisfaction, about the warranty terms, and you observe the cluster. 1. They shift to passive voice. It has been found that, instead of our customers tell us. 2. They increase qualifiers, generally, usually, in most cases, when before they spoke in specifics. 3. They break eye contact more, looking at their materials instead of at you. 4. Their speech speeds up, wanting to move past this topic. 5. They use convincing phrases. Honestly, this is the best, you have to believe me, when those phrases were absent from baseline speech. Cluster. High probability of deception or, at minimum, exaggeration and misrepresentation. The system is the same every time. Baseline during neutral conversation. Watch for deviations during sensitive topics. Confirm with clusters of multiple simultaneous indicators. This is not instinct. This is not gut feeling. This is systematic observation. Pattern recognition built on data. And with practice, it becomes faster, easier, more automatic. You spend less time consciously thinking through the steps and more time just noticing. Your unconscious mind learns what to look for and starts delivering conclusions without conscious effort. But in the beginning, in the student stage, you go through it methodically. You practice. You build the database. You learn what clusters look like in real time. And you verify. You check your hypotheses. You see if the person you suspected of deception was actually lying. You learn from when you were right and when you were wrong, because this system is not about achieving perfection. It is about dramatically increasing your accuracy, moving from chance-level detection to 70, 80, 90% accuracy with practice. The baseline deviation cluster system works because it accounts for individual differences, because it looks for change rather than fixed behaviors, because it requires multiple confirmations rather than single indicators, because it is grounded in how deception actually affects cognition and behavior. This is the foundation. Master this, and everything else builds on it. But the baseline deviation cluster system is just the beginning. It is the foundation, the core method that everything else builds upon. And if you want to move from competent to truly skilled, from accurate to exceptional, you need to sharpen the blade. You need advanced tools that elevate your pattern recognition to the next level. These are not replacements for the core system. They are enhancements, additions, techniques that work in harmony with baseline deviation cluster to give you even more data, even greater accuracy, even deeper insight. Let us start with strategic questioning. Most people ask the wrong questions when they suspect deception. They ask closed questions, yes or no questions, questions that allow the other person to answer with a single word and move on. Did you take it? Were you there? Is this true? These questions create minimal cognitive load. A liar can answer them easily. Yes. No. Absolutely. The cognitive effort required is almost nothing, and you learn almost nothing. Instead, ask open-ended questions, questions that require the person to construct a narrative, questions that force them to generate details, maintain consistency, and manage multiple elements simultaneously. Walk me through your whole day from when you woke up. Tell me everything that happened. Describe the scene. What did you see? What did you hear? Who else was there? This is strategic because lying requires cognitive resources. The more complex the answer required, the more resources are consumed, and when cognitive load increases, deviations from baseline become more pronounced. Tells become more visible. A truth-teller can walk through their day relatively easily because they are accessing memory. Memory flows. It has natural rhythm. It includes sensory details without effort, because those details were actually experienced. A liar has to construct the narrative in real time. They have to remember what they said earlier and keep it consistent. They have to invent details that sound plausible. They have to suppress the truth that keeps trying to surface. And all of that takes mental energy. So you watch. As they answer your open-ended question, you observe whether their speech slows down, whether pauses increase, whether they struggle more than baseline would predict for a simple memory recall. And then you use silence as a tool. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. When someone finishes speaking, we rush to fill the gap. We ask the next question. We respond. We keep the conversation moving. But silence is powerful. When you ask an open-ended question and the person answers, resist the urge to immediately respond. Just wait. Let the silence sit. Truth-tellers often add nothing. They answered the question. They are done. They are comfortable with the silence. Liars frequently cannot tolerate the silence. They interpret it as disbelief, as suspicion, and they start volunteering additional information, over-explaining, adding details they were not asked for, trying to convince you, and in that volunteered information, inconsistencies often appear. They add a detail that contradicts something they said earlier. They introduce a new element that does not fit. They reveal the cognitive strain of maintaining the deception. So ask open-ended questions, and then be silent. Let them fill the space. Watch what they volunteer. Next, let us talk about micro-expressions. Your face reveals emotion before you can control it. For a fraction of a second, 1/10 to 1/5 of a second, your true feeling flashes across your facial muscles. Then, your conscious mind catches up and you mask it, replacing the authentic emotion with the one you want to project. But that flash happens every time. And if you can train yourself to catch it, you gain access to emotional truth that words can hide. There are 7 universal emotions that show up in facial expressions across all cultures: happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, contempt, surprise. Each has a distinct facial signature. Contempt is particularly relevant to deception. It appears as a one-sided mouth raise, almost like a smirk. It signals feeling superior to someone or something, and it often flashes when someone is lying and feels like they are getting away with it, like they are smarter than you. Disgust appears in the nose wrinkle and upper lip raise. It can flash when someone is lying about something they actually find distasteful, or when they are disgusted with themselves for lying. Fear shows in raised upper eyelids, tense lower lids, and lips stretched horizontally. It can appear when a liar is afraid of being caught. Anger appears in lowered brows, pressed lips, and tension around the eyes. It might flash when a liar is angry at being questioned or frustrated by the cognitive load of deception. These micro-expressions happen too fast for most people to consciously register. You see the masked expression, the controlled face, but you miss the flash of truth that preceded it. Training yourself to catch them requires slowing down your visual processing. Not physically, but attentionally. You soften your gaze. Instead of staring directly at the person's mouth or eyes, you let your visual field widen. You take in the whole face at once with peripheral awareness. This is similar to how you see motion better in your peripheral vision than in your direct gaze. The same principle applies to micro-expressions. When you try too hard to catch them, you miss them. When you relax your attention and let your unconscious visual processing do its work, you start to notice. You practice by watching videos in slow motion, interviews, depositions, press conferences. You watch people's faces frame by frame and learn what the micro-expressions look like. Then you practice at regular speed, training your brain to recognize patterns it has now seen clearly. Over time, you start catching them in real conversations. A flash of contempt during an apology. A flicker of fear when you ask a specific question. A moment of disgust before they smile and agree. These micro-expressions do not prove deception on their own. But they are data. They are part of the cluster. When someone's micro-expression contradicts their words, that is a deviation worth noting. Now let us dive into linguistic analysis. The way people use language changes when they lie. Not in obvious ways, in subtle patterns that require attention to detect. Truth-tellers use first-person pronouns freely. I went to the store. I saw him there. I said this. They own their narrative because it is their lived experience. Liars distance themselves from the lie. They reduce first-person pronouns. They use passive voice. The store was visited. He was seen there. Things were said. The language becomes impersonal because they are not describing their actual experience. Truth-tellers include sensory details naturally. The coffee was too hot. The room smelled like cigarettes. Her voice was shaking. Memory is sensory. When you recall something you actually experienced, the sensory impressions come with it. Liars either omit sensory details entirely, creating a sterile narrative, or they add overly specific, irrelevant details to make the story sound real. I was wearing my blue shirt, the one I bought at the mall 3 weeks ago. These details feel inserted, rather than naturally recalled because they are. Truth-tellers recall memory non-linearly. They remember something, then circle back to add a detail they forgot. Oh, and before that happened, I should mention. Or they correct themselves. Wait, no, it was Tuesday, not Wednesday. Memory is messy. It is not perfectly chronological. Liars often tell stories in perfect chronological order. First this happened, then this, then this. The narrative is too clean, too polished, too logical. Because they constructed it that way. They built a story with a beginning, middle, and end, rather than accessing a memory that exists as fragments and impressions. Truth-tellers include emotional responses. I was so frustrated. That made me happy. I felt terrible about it. Emotion is part of experience. Liars often omit emotional content. Their narratives feel emotionally flat, or they add emotion in ways that feel performed rather than felt. I was just absolutely devastated, they say, with no physiological indicators of distress. Truth-tellers use convincing phrases sparingly, if at all. They are not trying to convince you because they are just telling you what happened. Liars overuse convincing phrases, honestly. To tell you the truth. Believe me, I swear. These phrases appear because they are trying to compensate for the lack of actual credibility. They are working to convince you because they know their story is weak. Watch for verb tense shifts. Truth-tellers generally maintain consistent verb tense when recalling past events. Liars sometimes slip between past and present tense because they are constructing the story in the present moment while claiming it happened in the past. Listen for missing expected details. When someone describes going to dinner but never mentions what they ate. When they describe a conversation but never mentions what was said. These gaps appear because they are inventing a scenario they did not actually experience. All of these linguistic patterns are deviations from how truthful memory recall sounds, and when you hear multiple patterns simultaneously, you have a linguistic cluster that suggests deception. But here is where we need to talk about context calibration. Not all deviations indicate deception. Some people deviate from typical patterns because of who they are, how they are wired, what they have experienced. Cultural background affects communication style. In some cultures, direct eye contact with an authority figure is considered disrespectful. In others, it is required for credibility. If you apply a baseline developed in one cultural context to someone from another, you will misread them. Neurodivergence affects baseline behavior. Someone with ADHD might fidget constantly, speak rapidly, shift topics frequently. Someone with autism might avoid eye contact, speak in a monotone, struggle with expected social reciprocity. These are not deception indicators. These are neurological differences. Trauma history affects stress responses. Someone with a trauma background might show hypervigilance, dissociation, or intense stress responses to questions that seem neutral to you but trigger associations for them. Their deviations are trauma responses, not deception. Personality type affects communication patterns. Introverts might naturally give brief answers and need time to process before speaking. Extroverts might naturally over-explain and think out loud. Anxious people might show stress indicators frequently. These are personality baselines, not lies. This is why establishing a true baseline is so critical. You need to know what is normal for this person, not what is normal for people in general. And when you suspect deception, but the person also has cultural, neurological, trauma-based, or personality factors that could explain the deviations, you adjust. You look for additional indicators. You verify through other means. You avoid false positives by understanding the full context. Finally, let us talk about refining your intuition. You have gut feelings, instincts, a sense that something is off, even when you cannot articulate why. And you have probably dismissed these feelings before, telling yourself you are being paranoid, that you have no evidence, that you should not judge. But here is what is actually happening. Your unconscious mind processes thousands of micro-signals that your conscious mind cannot track simultaneously. Tiny facial movements, subtle changes in vocal tone, inconsistencies in story structure, behavioral anomalies. Your unconscious notices all of it, runs pattern recognition at high speed, and delivers a conclusion as a feeling. This is not magic. This is neuroscience. Your brain is designed for this. The anterior cingulate cortex flags prediction violations. The insula generates gut feelings. The unconscious processing happens faster and with more data than conscious analysis. So when you feel that something is off, do not dismiss it, but also do not automatically trust it without verification. Learn to distinguish between two types of gut feelings. Anxiety-based paranoia feels scattered, unfocused. It applies to many situations without specific triggers. It comes with racing thoughts and catastrophizing. It is not tied to observable deviations, but to your own fear. Pattern recognition-based instinct feels specific, grounded. It activates in response to particular behaviors or statements. It comes with calm clarity, not panic. It is tied to real data, even if you cannot consciously articulate what data. When you feel instinct activating, pause. Ask yourself, what exactly am I noticing? What changed? What feels off? Often, when you slow down and examine the feeling, you can identify the specific deviations that triggered it. Then you verify. You test your instinct against the baseline deviation cluster system. You look for confirmatory evidence. You remain open to being wrong. Over time, as you practice, your instincts become more reliable. Your unconscious pattern recognition gets trained by feedback, and you learn to trust refined intuition backed by experience. Integrate these tools gradually. Do not try to master everything at once. Start with strategic questioning. Practice open-ended questions and silence. Then add micro-expression awareness. Then linguistic analysis. Then context calibration. Then intuition refinement. Each tool enhances the others. Each layer adds depth to your perception. And together, they transform you from someone who knows the basics into someone who sees with rare clarity. But here is what most people miss. Learning the techniques is not enough. You can master baseline deviation cluster. You can learn strategic questioning and micro-expression reading and linguistic analysis. You can practice until you are accurate in controlled settings. And then life happens. You get stressed. You get distracted. You get emotionally dysregulated. And suddenly all your skills disappear. Your pattern recognition fails. You miss obvious tells. You make false accusations. You operate from anxiety instead of awareness. Because lie detection is not just a skill set. It is a capacity. And capacity depends on the health of the underlying system, your nervous system, your attention, your relationships, your environment, your values. If you want long-term mastery, if you want skills that remain reliable under pressure, you need to build the infrastructure that supports them. You need foundations that make accuracy sustainable rather than sporadic. Let us start with attention. Your ability to detect deception depends entirely on your ability to pay attention, to notice subtle changes, to track patterns across time, to stay present with what is actually happening instead of what you expect or fear. And modern life is designed to destroy your attention. Your phone interrupts you every few minutes. Your browser has 20 tabs open. Your mind is split between the conversation in front of you and the email you need to send, and the worry about tomorrow and the replay of yesterday. You are physically present, but mentally fragmented. In this state, you cannot detect deception. You cannot establish baseline because you are not paying enough attention to notice normal patterns. You cannot catch deviations because you are not tracking closely enough. You cannot see micro-expressions because you are not actually looking at the person's face with sustained focus. Pattern recognition requires sustained, focused attention. Not hypervigilant attention, not anxious attention, calm, relaxed, continuous attention. And this capacity is trainable, not through trying harder, through practice that rebuilds your attention span and presence. Meditation is the most direct path, not as a spiritual practice, though it can be that. As attention training. You sit, you focus on breath or body or sound. Your mind wanders. You notice it wandered. You bring it back. You repeat this thousands of times. What you are training is not the ability to never get distracted. What you are training is the ability to notice distraction and return to focus, to catch your mind wandering and bring it back, over and over, until this becomes automatic. This exact skill transfers to conversations. Your mind wanders during a discussion. You catch it. You bring attention back to the person in front of you. You notice you are thinking about your response instead of listening. You return to listening. You realize you are staring at your phone instead of observing their face. You put the phone down and observe. Single tasking reinforces this. One thing at a time. When you are in a conversation, you are in a conversation. Not checking your phone, not planning dinner, not half listening while doing something else. Fully present. This feels inefficient at first, like you are wasting time. But presence is not about efficiency. It is about effectiveness. 5 minutes of full attention yields more information than 30 minutes of fragmented attention. Digital boundaries support this. Phone on airplane mode during important conversations. No notifications interrupting meetings. Designated times for email instead of constant checking. Creating space for undivided attention. Deep listening exercises build the skill directly. You practice listening to someone for 5 minutes without interrupting, without planning your response, without judging. Just receiving what they are saying. Noticing not just words, but tone, rhythm, energy. This is the foundation of pattern recognition. And there is a direct connection between mindfulness and micro-expression detection. When your attention is fragmented, you miss the 1/10 of a second flash of emotion. When your attention is calm and sustained, your peripheral visual processing catches it. Mindfulness creates the attentional state where micro-expressions become visible. But attention alone is not enough. You also need relational health. Your ability to detect deception is directly tied to your own emotional regulation. When you are dysregulated, when your nervous system is activated, your prefrontal cortex goes offline. And with it goes your pattern recognition, your strategic thinking, your ability to observe objectively. When you are anxious, you see threat everywhere. You misinterpret neutral behaviors as deceptive. You create false positives because your nervous system is primed to detect danger. When you are angry, you project hostility. You assume bad intent. You interrogate instead of observe. You push people into defensive postures that look like deception, even when they are just self-protection. When you are exhausted, your cognitive resources are depleted. You cannot track patterns. You cannot maintain attention. You default to shortcuts and assumptions. When you are depressed, you either do not care enough to notice, or you assume everything is hopeless, including people's honesty. Your accuracy depends on your state, and your state depends on how you care for your nervous system. This means sleep. Real sleep. 7 to 9 hours. Not 5 hours supplemented with caffeine. Your brain consolidates pattern recognition during sleep, prunes irrelevant connections, strengthens important ones. Sleep deprivation destroys this process. This means stress management, not just tolerating chronic stress, but actively discharging it. Movement, breath work, time in nature. Whatever brings your nervous system back to baseline. Because chronic stress keeps you in hypervigilance, which mimics the suspicious stage. Everything looks like a threat. Everyone seems like a liar. This means secure attachment. If you have unresolved attachment trauma, if you experienced inconsistency or betrayal in early relationships, your baseline is set to expect deception. You bring hypervigilance to every interaction. You create false positives because your past has trained you to see abandonment and betrayal everywhere. Or you go the opposite direction. You dissociate. You do not want to see deception because seeing it would trigger old wounds. So you create false negatives. You miss obvious lies because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging that people you trusted are hurting you, and that pattern is too painful to face again. Working through attachment trauma, whether through therapy or other healing modalities, recalibrates your baseline. It allows you to see present reality instead of projecting past patterns onto current relationships. Your relational health affects your detection accuracy. Healthy, regulated you sees clearly. Dysregulated you sees through the distortion of your own unresolved material. Next, consider environment design. You can develop incredible lie detection skills and still end up in situations where you are deceived, because you structured your life in ways that make deception easy and verification hard. Structure life for clear communication. In relationships, create norms where honesty is expected and rewarded, where you can ask hard questions without it being interpreted as attack, where inconsistency is addressed early instead of ignored until it becomes crisis. Set boundaries that make deception harder. In business, you verify claims, you check references, you read contracts carefully. You do not proceed on trust alone when stakes are high. This is not cynicism. This is wisdom. Create accountability systems. In partnerships, you have shared access to information, not because you do not trust, but because transparency is the standard. In teams, you have oversight and review processes, not because everyone is lying, but because systems that assume honesty and verify anyway protect everyone. Build redundancy into important decisions. You never make a major choice based on one person's word alone. You seek multiple sources. You triangulate information. You verify through independent channels. This protects you from both deception and honest mistakes. If you are hiring, you do not just believe the candidate. You check references. You verify employment history. You assess claims against evidence. If you are investing, you do not just trust the pitch. You review financials. You consult experts. You do due diligence. This is not about suspecting everyone. It is about building systems where the truth emerges naturally and deception becomes difficult to maintain. Environment design also means choosing relationships and contexts that align with your values. If you value honesty, you gravitate toward people and environments where honesty is the norm. You leave situations where deception is accepted or rewarded. You do not try to detect lies in environments designed to produce them. You change environments. Then there is continuous learning. Pattern recognition improves with exposure diversity. The more different people you observe, the more contexts you experience, the more cultural backgrounds you encounter, the richer your database becomes. If you only observe people like yourself, in contexts like yours, your pattern recognition stays narrow. You develop expertise in one demographic, but miss tells in others. So you expand exposure. You watch interviews with people from different cultures. You observe interactions in different socio-economic contexts. You study communication across age groups, personality types, professional backgrounds. You watch depositions, court testimonies, press conferences, political debates, sales pitches, apologies, denials. You watch with the sound off to isolate visual tells. You watch audio only to focus on linguistic patterns. You watch at normal speed and in slow motion. You study your own lies and your own tells. When you shade the truth, or avoid a question, or exaggerate a story, you notice what you do, how you change from your baseline, what phrases you use, where you look, how your body shifts. This builds empathy and understanding, and it makes you harder to deceive because you recognize the patterns from the inside. You learn continuously because the skill has no ceiling. There are always subtler tells, more complex patterns, deeper levels of mastery. You stay humble, you stay curious, you remain a perpetual student even as you become increasingly skilled. And finally, you need an ethical framework. Because this skill is power, and power without ethics is dangerous. You can use lie detection for protection, to keep yourself safe, to make wise decisions, to build relationships with honest people, to avoid manipulation. This is ethical use. This is why you learned the skill. Or you can use it for manipulation, to exploit people's vulnerabilities, to gain unfair advantage, to control others through superior insight, to weaponize your awareness. This is corruption of the skill. The difference is intention. Are you using this to protect or to exploit, to serve truth or to serve your ego, to build trust or to destroy it? You also need wisdom about when to confront deception and when to walk away. Sometimes confrontation is necessary, when the deception is harming you or others, when the relationship has enough foundation that honesty is possible, when there is something worth saving. Sometimes walking away is wiser, when the person is deeply committed to the lie, when confrontation would escalate danger, when the relationship is already broken, when your energy is better spent elsewhere. Sometimes you extend grace, when the lie is small and the person is struggling, when honesty would serve no purpose but shame, when compassion matters more than being right. Wisdom is knowing which response fits which situation, and this comes from values, from asking what serves love, truth, and protection in this specific moment with this specific person. You also carry the responsibility of seeing clearly. You see things others miss. You know things others do not. And this can be lonely, isolating. You watch people being deceived, and you cannot always intervene. You see patterns you wish you did not see. This responsibility requires maturity. You do not announce your insights constantly. You do not correct everyone. You do not make your perception everyone else's problem. You hold what you see with care. You share when sharing serves. You stay silent when silence is wiser. The infrastructure matters. Attention, regulation, environment, learning, ethics. These foundations make the skills sustainable. They transform temporary competence into lifelong mastery. They ensure that your accuracy remains reliable across contexts, under pressure, over decades. Build the infrastructure, and the skills will have a stable platform to operate from. And now you might be wondering, is this actually real? Is the science solid? Or is this just another system that sounds compelling but lacks evidence? Let us ground everything you have learned in the actual neuroscience, in the research, in the measurable, observable mechanisms that make lie detection not just possible but scientifically validated. Because this is not speculation. This is brain architecture. Start with the basic neurological fact. Lying requires more cognitive resources than telling the truth. When you tell the truth, you access memory. Your hippocampus retrieves the stored experience. Your brain replays what actually happened. The cognitive load is minimal because you are not creating anything. You are simply reporting. When you lie, your prefrontal cortex engages in multiple simultaneous tasks. It must suppress the truth that your brain wants to tell. It must construct a fictional narrative that sounds plausible. It must monitor the listener's reaction to see if they believe you. It must maintain consistency with what you said earlier. It must predict what questions might come next and prepare answers. It must manage your own anxiety about being caught. All of this happens simultaneously. All of this requires energy, glucose, oxygen, neural activation, and this increased cognitive load creates measurable changes. Speech patterns change. The effort of construction slows down language production. Pauses lengthen as the brain works to generate the next plausible detail. Speech may become less fluent, with more filler words, more hesitations, more self-corrections, not because memory is unclear, but because the construction process is demanding, or speech speeds up, rushing through the lie to reduce the time spent in the high-load state. The person wants to get the deception over with quickly because maintaining it is exhausting. Movement patterns change. Some people become more rigid, consciously controlling their body to avoid giving away tells. Others become more animated, using movement to discharge the nervous energy created by cognitive strain. Physiological markers change. And this brings us to the autonomic nervous system. When you lie, especially when the stakes are high, your body responds as if under threat. Because, psychologically, you are under threat. The threat of being caught, of facing consequences, of losing credibility or relationship or opportunity. Your sympathetic nervous system activates. This is the fight or flight response, and it creates observable physiological changes. Heart rate increases. Your cardiovascular system prepares for action. Blood pressure rises. This is not conscious. This is automatic nervous system response to stress. Pupils dilate. Your eyes prepare to take in more visual information, scanning for threat, monitoring the listener's reaction. Microsweating occurs. Tiny increases in perspiration, often undetectable to the naked eye, but measurable with instruments. The galvanic skin response changes. Vocal tension increases. The muscles around your larynx tighten under stress. This changes vocal pitch, often raising it slightly. It affects vocal quality, making the voice sound tighter, less resonant. Breathing pattern shifts, often becoming more shallow and rapid, or sometimes the opposite, with the person consciously trying to control breathing to appear calm, creating an unnaturally slow and deliberate pattern. These physiological changes are real. They are measurable. They happen because lying activates stress systems in the brain and body. But here is the critical point. These markers indicate arousal, not necessarily deception. Someone can show all of these signs while telling the truth if they are anxious about being believed, if the topic is emotionally charged, if they fear consequences even though they are innocent. This is why context matters. This is why baseline matters. This is why you need clusters of indicators rather than single tells. The physiological stress response is data, valuable data, but it must be interpreted within the full pattern. Now let us talk about the brain systems that make pattern recognition possible. Your brain operates on predictive processing. It is constantly generating predictions about what should happen next based on past experience. And when reality violates those predictions, specific brain regions activate to flag the violation. The anterior cingulate cortex is a key player here. It monitors for prediction errors, for things that do not match expectations. When someone's behavior deviates from their baseline, when their story has internal inconsistencies, when something feels off, your anterior cingulate cortex lights up. It sends a signal. Pay attention. Something unexpected is happening. This is often experienced as a vague sense of unease, a feeling that something is wrong, but you cannot immediately articulate what. That is your anterior cingulate cortex doing its job, flagging the pattern violation before your conscious mind has fully processed it. The insula is another critical region. It generates what we call gut feelings, interoceptive awareness, the sense of knowing something without knowing how you know. The insula integrates thousands of subtle signals, bodily sensations, pattern matches, and emotional responses, and delivers a conclusion as intuition. When you get that gut feeling that someone is lying, your insula is often behind it. It has processed micro-cues faster than conscious thought and generated the felt sense of deception. The fusiform face area processes faces with incredible speed and precision. It analyzes facial expressions, including micro-expressions, before you are consciously aware of seeing them. This region can detect a flash of emotion that lasts 1/5 of a second, process what emotion it was, and send that information to other brain regions for integration. This is why you sometimes sense an emotion in someone before they have finished masking it. Your fusiform face area caught the micro-expression. Your conscious mind never saw it directly, but the information was processed and integrated into your overall assessment of the person's state. These brain systems are already working in you. Right now. They have been since birth. You were born with pattern recognition capacity. The question is whether you train it or ignore it. And the research shows that training works. Studies on lie detection accuracy consistently find that untrained people detect lies at barely above chance. Around 54%, essentially a coin flip. People are not naturally good at this, despite believing they are. But trained individuals, people who learn proper methodology, reach 70 to 90% accuracy. This is not incremental improvement. This is transformation. Paul Ekman's research on micro-expressions demonstrated that training significantly improves detection rates. People who learned to recognize the 7 universal emotions in their brief, uncontrolled form became dramatically better at detecting deception because they could see the emotional truth beneath the verbal lie. Aldert Vrai's work on cognitive load and strategic questioning showed that specific interview techniques increase detection accuracy. Open-ended questions, requests for reverse chronology, asking for unexpected details, all of these create cognitive load that makes deception indicators more visible. Research on the baseline deviation cluster approach, looking at individual differences rather than universal tells, consistently shows higher accuracy than looking for generic signs. Because people lie differently, and methods that account for individual variation outperform methods that assume everyone responds the same way. The science is clear. Proper training produces measurable improvement. This is not pseudoscience. This is validated, replicated research. But what about technology? What about lie detectors? Polygraphs measure arousal, heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, galvanic skin response. And they assume that lying produces more arousal than truth-telling. But this assumption is flawed. Innocent people who are afraid of being falsely accused show high arousal. Guilty people who are psychopathic and feel no anxiety about lying show low arousal. Trained individuals who know how to control their breathing and heart rate can beat polygraphs. The National Academy of Sciences reviewed the research on polygraphs and concluded they are insufficiently reliable for security screening, that innocent people are too often misclassified as deceptive and guilty people too often appear truthful. Polygraphs measure something real, but they do not measure deception specifically. They measure the body's stress response, which correlates imperfectly with lying. Artificial intelligence shows more promise. Machine learning algorithms can analyze thousands of variables simultaneously. Facial muscle movements, vocal patterns, linguistic markers, eye tracking. They can detect patterns humans miss because of the sheer volume of data processing. But AI still lacks contextual understanding. It cannot establish baseline the way a human can through conversation. It cannot account for cultural differences, individual personality, or situational factors with the nuance a trained human brings. It cannot understand meaning the way humans do. The future likely involves human-AI collaboration. AI handling the data-intensive pattern recognition, humans providing contextual interpretation and ethical judgment. But for now, properly trained human perception remains the gold standard. And then there is the research on memory versus fabrication. Genuine memories have specific characteristics. They include sensory details, what things looked like, sounded like, smelled like, felt like. Because memory is encoded through sensory experience. When you recall something real, the sensory impressions are part of the retrieval. Genuine memories include emotional responses, how you felt during the event, the fear or joy or frustration or confusion you experienced. Emotion and memory are encoded together in the amygdala and hippocampus. Genuine memories are non-linear. You remember something, then think of something else, then circle back. Or you recall a detail later that you forgot initially. Or you correct yourself when you realize you misremembered a minor element. Memory is reconstructive, not playback. It is messy. Fabricated stories are different. They tend to be chronologically perfect. First this happened, then this, in clean, linear order. Because the person is constructing a narrative, not accessing memory. And narratives have structure. Fabricated stories often lack sensory detail, or they include overly specific, irrelevant sensory details that feel inserted to make the story seem real. He was wearing a blue shirt. The car was a Toyota Camry. Details that feel like props rather than natural elements of recalled experience. Fabricated stories are emotionally flat. The person describes events that should have emotional weight with no corresponding physiological or verbal indicators of feeling those emotions. They say they were terrified, but show no fear in their body or voice. Research by Aldert Vrij and others has validated these differences. Trained coders analyzing transcripts can distinguish truth from lies with significant accuracy by looking for these memory markers versus fabricationed markers. This is why strategic questioning works. When you ask someone to recall in detail, to describe sensory experience, to include emotional responses, truth-tellers do this easily because they are accessing real memories. Liars struggle because they are trying to construct plausible sensory and emotional content in real time. The neuroscience explains the method. The brain mechanisms explain why baseline deviation cluster works. The research validates that training produces results. The technology shows both the limits of mechanical detection and the unique value of trained human judgment. This is not faith-based. This is not wishful thinking. This is grounded in how brains work, how bodies respond to cognitive load and stress, how memory differs from fabrication, how pattern recognition can be trained to high levels of accuracy. You are not learning a trick. You are learning to leverage brain systems that already exist. You are training capacities you already possess. You are bringing conscious awareness to processes that have been running unconsciously, and in doing so, dramatically improving their accuracy. The architecture of truth is built into your neurology. The science validates the method. The research confirms that what you are learning works, and this matters because belief affects commitment. If you think this is pseudoscience, you will not practice. You will not persist through the student stage. You will not build the infrastructure. But when you understand that this is real, that the mechanisms are sound, that the research is solid, you commit differently. You practice with confidence. You trust the process. You persist through difficulty because you know the destination is achievable. The science is not separate from the practice. The science is the foundation that makes the practice credible, that transforms hope into evidence-based confidence. You are not hoping this works. You know it works, because the brain is designed for pattern recognition, and you are learning to use that design with precision. But all of this training, all of this knowledge, all of this practice means nothing if you cannot apply it when the stakes are highest, when your heart is racing, when you desperately need to know the truth, when the consequences of being wrong are severe. This is where theory meets reality, where skills are tested under pressure. Consider the romantic confrontation. You suspect infidelity. The inconsistencies have been accumulating. The late nights, the changed passwords, the stories that do not quite add up. And now you are sitting across from your partner, about to ask the question that might end the relationship. Your hands are shaking. Your chest is tight. Every fiber of your being wants this to not be true. And simultaneously, part of you is already certain it is true and is preparing for the devastation. In this state, your pattern recognition is compromised. Your emotional investment creates massive blind spots. Your fear generates confirmation bias. If you want to believe they are faithful, you will dismiss deviations. If you are already convinced they cheated, you will see deception in innocent stress responses. So before you ask the question, you regulate yourself. You breathe. Deep, slow breaths that engage your parasympathetic nervous system. You ground yourself in your body. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice the chair beneath you. Come into the present moment instead of spiraling into catastrophic futures. You create emotional distance, not coldness, not detachment from caring, but space between your fear and your observation. You remind yourself, I am here to gather information, to see clearly. Whatever the truth is, I can handle it. But I need to actually see the truth, not my projection of it. Then you ask open-ended questions, not "Did you cheat on me?" That is a closed question that allows a simple denial and creates minimal cognitive load. Instead, walk me through your day yesterday, from when you woke up until you came home. And you watch, you compare to baseline, you look for deviations, you notice if they struggle with details that should be easy, if their timeline has gaps, if they use distancing language about parts of the day. You stay calm, you resist the urge to interrupt or accuse, you let them talk, you use silence to see what they volunteer. You ask follow-up questions that circle back to earlier parts of the story to check for consistency. And you watch your own reactions. When you feel the urge to dismiss a red flag, you pause. Why am I dismissing this? Is it because it is genuinely explainable, or because I do not want it to be true? When you feel the urge to leap to accusation based on one deviation, you pause. Am I seeing a pattern, or am I seeing my fear? This is application under pressure. Maintaining your skills when your nervous system wants to flood with emotion and shut down your prefrontal cortex. Or consider the business negotiation. You are about to invest significant capital. The opportunity seems incredible. The person across the table is charismatic, confident, promising returns that sound too good to be true. You want this to be real. You need this to be real. Maybe your financial future depends on it. Maybe you have already told people about this opportunity. Maybe you have invested so much time and energy that walking away would feel like failure. And the person is good. They have answers for everything. They make eye contact. They tell compelling stories. They show you documents that look legitimate. But something feels off. Your gut is sending quiet alarm signals, and you need to know whether to trust your gut or dismiss it as fear of opportunity. You regulate. You do not make the decision in this moment, in this emotional state, under this person's influence. You tell them you need time to review everything. You step away, you create space. Then you verify. You check the documents with independent experts. You research the company beyond their website. You ask to speak with past investors or clients and actually follow through. You introduce information you learned independently and watch whether their story remains consistent or shifts. You do not invest based on charm. You do not invest based on promises. You invest based on verified reality. And if verification is blocked, if they pressure you to decide quickly, if they make excuses about why you cannot speak to references, those are massive red flags, regardless of how good the pitch sounds. Or the parenting moment. Your teenager comes home past curfew. You smell alcohol. Their eyes are red. Their story about being at the library makes no sense at this hour. You are afraid. Afraid of what they might have been doing. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of them making choices that could harm their future. And fear makes you want to interrogate, to accuse, to control. But you regulate. You breathe. You remind yourself that your goal is not to win a confrontation. Your goal is to understand what happened and ensure their safety. You establish baseline by asking about neutral parts of their day first. Then you shift to the evening. Tell me about your night. Walk me through it. And you listen. You watch for the clusters, the linguistic distancing, the overly specific irrelevant details, the gaps where expected information should be. And you follow up, not with accusations, with curiosity. You said you were at the library until it closed. What time does it close on Fridays? If they do not know, if they scramble to construct an answer that is deviation, you circle back. Earlier you said Sarah was with you, but just now you said you were alone. Help me understand the timeline. You give them the opportunity to correct or explain, and you watch whether the explanation makes sense or creates more inconsistency. You manage your own state throughout. When you feel anger rising, you pause. When you want to lecture, you breathe. When you want to believe them despite clear deviations, you notice that impulse and stay with the data. This is the art of verification. You are not a prosecutor trying to prove guilt. You are an investigator trying to discover truth. And truth emerges through patient, strategic questioning combined with careful observation. But detecting deception and addressing deception are different skills. Sometimes you detect a lie, and the wisest response is to say nothing, to walk away, to disengage from the relationship or situation without confrontation. Maybe the person is not safe to confront. Maybe they will escalate to aggression or manipulation. Maybe the relationship is already over, and confrontation serves no purpose except your ego's need to be right. Sometimes you detect a lie, and direct confrontation is necessary, when the deception is harming you or others, when there is something worth saving if truth can be restored, when accountability matters. But how you confront makes all the difference. Coming in hot, accusatory, emotional, puts the other person in a defensive posture. They will deny. They will counterattack. They will make you the bad guy for not trusting them. And even if you are right about the deception, you lose the opportunity for truth-telling because you have created a war instead of a conversation. Instead, you present your observations without accusation. I have noticed some inconsistencies in what you have told me, and I am trying to understand them. Then you list the specific inconsistencies, the facts, the contradictions, without interpretation, without emotion. On Monday, you said you were at the office until 8. On Wednesday, you mentioned leaving at 6 that day. I am confused about the timeline. This creates space for them to explain. Maybe there is a genuine misunderstanding. Maybe you misheard. Maybe the inconsistency has an innocent explanation. Or maybe they scramble. Maybe they realize they have been caught. Maybe the explanation they offer creates more inconsistencies. Either way, you have opened a door to truth without kicking it down. And sometimes you are wrong, even with all your training, even with careful observation, even with clusters and verification. You misread stress as deception. You misinterpret a baseline deviation that had nothing to do with lying. You let your confirmation bias override your observation. You were in a dysregulated state, and your pattern recognition failed, and you accused someone who was telling the truth. This is where humility becomes essential. When you realize you were wrong, you own it immediately, fully, without minimizing or defending. I was wrong. I misread the situation. I am genuinely sorry for accusing you. I let my fear override my judgment, and that was not fair to you. This is not weakness. This is integrity, and it actually strengthens the relationship if the person is genuine. It shows you can be wrong and admit it, that you value truth over ego, that you are human, and you learn from the error. You study what led you astray. Was it confirmation, bias, dysregulation? A context factor you did not account for. Each error, when examined, refines your system. But what about when you detect deception and you cannot immediately exit the situation? Maybe it is a job you need to keep while you search for another. Maybe it is a living situation you cannot leave yet. Maybe it is a co-parent you must continue interacting with. Maybe it is a business obligation you are contractually bound to. You protect yourself without announcing what you see, grey-rocking. You become emotionally neutral, uninteresting, unreactive. You give minimal information. You do not share your plans, your feelings, your vulnerabilities with someone you know is deceptive. Information diet. You limit what they have access to. You do not lie. But you do not volunteer. You answer questions minimally. You keep your cards close. Strategic ambiguity. When asked about your intentions or plans, you stay vague. I am considering my options. I have not decided yet. This protects you from their manipulation while you plan your exit. You document. If it is a business situation, you keep records, emails, contracts, conversations in writing. You protect yourself legally and factually. You build your exit, quietly, carefully. You apply for other jobs. You save money. You talk to lawyers. You create a support network. You plan your next move without broadcasting it to the person who has been deceiving you. And you maintain your integrity throughout. You do not become deceptive because someone deceived you. You do not manipulate because you were manipulated. You stay aligned with your values while protecting yourself. This is application under pressure. Staying regulated when you want to panic. Observing clearly when emotion threatens to overwhelm analysis. Verifying carefully when you are desperate for a particular answer. Confronting gracefully when you want to attack. Admitting error when your ego wants to defend. Protecting yourself wisely when you cannot yet escape. The skills work under pressure only if you have built the infrastructure. Only if your nervous system is healthy enough to regulate under stress. Only if your attention is trained enough to maintain focus when triggered. Only if your values are clear enough to guide you when emotions run hot. This is why mastery is not just about technique. It is about becoming a person who can hold their center in the storm, who can see clearly when everything in them wants to look away or project, who can act wisely when reactive impulses scream for immediate release. The pressure reveals whether your foundation is solid, and if it is, your skills remain accessible even when the stakes are highest. And so you have arrived, not at the end, but at the beginning of a new way of being. Look back at where you started, the person who accepted information at face value, who was shocked when lies were revealed, who replayed conversations afterward, searching for signs that were invisible in the moment. That person still exists in your memory, but that person is no longer who you are. You have walked through discomfort to get here. The uncomfortable awareness that deception surrounds you. The unsettling transition through suspicion, where you saw threats everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The humbling student phase where you were wrong as often as you were right. The thousands of observations and adjustments and recalibrations that brought you to this moment. You could have retreated. Many people do. They touch the edge of awareness and decide that ignorance is easier, that not knowing is less painful than seeing clearly, that the comfort of naivety outweighs the power of perception. But you did not retreat. You moved forward, through the difficulty, through the doubt, through the errors and the awkwardness and the growing pains of developing a new capacity. And now you see clearly, not perfectly, not with absolute certainty, but with calibrated confidence, with heightened perception, with pattern recognition that has moved from conscious effort to automatic awareness. You notice things now, subtle shifts in how people speak when topics change, micro-expressions that flash across faces before being masked, inconsistencies in stories told across multiple conversations, clusters of deviations that signal high probability of deception, and this seeing feels natural now. Not like work, not like hypervigilance, just like peripheral vision. Always there, always processing, always available when you need it. Your relationship with trust has transformed. You used to think trust meant believing without question, taking people at their word, assuming honesty unless proven otherwise. And when that trust was violated, you felt betrayed not just by them, but by your own judgment. Now you understand that trust is not the same as naivety. Trust is a choice, an informed choice, a choice you make after observation, after verification, after seeing patterns of consistency that earn it. You still trust. You have not become cynical. You have not closed your heart. But your trust is different now. It is active, not passive, discerning, not blind, conditional on evidence, not granted automatically. You extend trust and you verify. Not because you suspect everyone, but because wisdom requires both hope and preparation. You hope for the best in people, and you prepare for the reality that some people will not meet that hope. You extend grace. You give people room to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to have bad days. You do not interpret every deviation as deception. You account for stress, for context, for human complexity. But you also maintain boundaries. You do not let grace become tolerance for repeated violation. You do not let compassion become complicity in your own harm. Trust is no longer something that happens to you. It is something you do, deliberately, with awareness, with the quiet confidence that you will see if it is misplaced and can respond accordingly. And this shift in trust changes your relationships, fundamentally, at every level. You attract different people now, not consciously, not through announcing your skills, but energetically. Something in how you hold yourself has changed, the way you make eye contact, the questions you ask, the pauses you allow, the details you remember. Genuine people feel this and relax into it. They sense that you see them clearly and that you choose to be with them anyway, that your trust is earned, not assumed, and therefore more valuable, that you can handle truth, so they can bring their truth to you. Manipulators feel this and often move on. Something in their unconscious pattern matching tells them you are not an easy mark, that their usual techniques will not work here, that the effort required to deceive you exceeds the potential reward. So they find easier targets. You weed out deceptive people quickly now, not with confrontation, not with accusations, just by noticing the clusters early, by asking strategic questions, by watching for consistency across time. And when you see the patterns, you disengage before investing deeply. This changes the composition of your life. The people around you trend toward authenticity, not because authentic people are perfect, but because they are honest about their imperfections. And you can work with honesty. You cannot work with deception. Your bonds with genuine people deepen because they know you see them, really see them, the good and the difficult and the complex, and you choose them anyway. That level of conscious choice creates intimacy that passive assumption never could. You create safer spaces for truth in your relationships, in your teams, in your family, because people sense that you can handle reality, that you do not need pretty lies, that honesty will not destroy you, so they tell you the truth. And truth creates foundation that deception never can. But the transformation extends beyond relationships. Your decision-making across all domains has elevated, because pattern recognition is not just about detecting lies. It is about detecting patterns, period. And the neural pathways you have strengthened, they apply to everything. You read rooms now. You walk into a meeting and you feel the energy. You notice the unspoken dynamics. Who has real power versus who has title. Where the alliances are. Where the tension lives. This is the same pattern recognition you use for deception applied to group dynamics. You assess risk better. In investments, in opportunities, in career moves, you notice when something sounds too good to be true because you see the gaps in the story, the missing details, the overly polished presentation, the pressure to decide quickly. The same clusters that signal personal deception signal professional fraud. You anticipate outcomes more accurately. Because you read people's true intentions beneath their stated ones, you see what they are actually committed to versus what they claim to want, and you plan accordingly. You spot opportunity that others miss, because you see patterns emerging before they become obvious. The same brain that notices behavioral deviations notices market trends, cultural shifts, gaps in industries. Pattern recognition compounds across contexts. Your strategic thinking improves. Because deception detection taught you to think several steps ahead, to consider what someone will say next, to test consistency across time, to verify through multiple channels. These are the same skills that make you better at chess, at negotiation, at leadership. The benefits compound. They spread through your career, your finances, your health decisions, your parenting, your friendships. Everything improves when you see clearly. But with this sight comes responsibility. And wait, you see things others do not see. You watch people being deceived, and you cannot always intervene. You notice patterns that make you lonely, because most people are still operating from innocence or suspicion. You cannot unsee what you have learned to see. This can be isolating. You sit in conversations where everyone believes someone you know is lying, and you cannot always explain how you know without sounding paranoid or arrogant. So sometimes you stay silent. You protect yourself. You watch the situation unfold. And there is temptation. Now that you understand how deception works, you could use it. You could manipulate. You could exploit people's truth bias, their cognitive load limitations, their confirmation bias. You could be very effective at it. This is where your ethics become essential, where your values guide you. You did not learn this skill to become a better liar. You learned it to protect yourself and others from lies. You use this power to illuminate, not to dominate, to protect, not to exploit, to build trust through transparency, not to manipulate through superior insight. You hold yourself to a higher standard because you have higher capability. With great perception comes great responsibility, and you honor that. Your new normal is different from who you were. You move through daily life with quiet confidence, not arrogance, not superiority, just the calm certainty that you see what is actually happening, that you are not operating from illusion or projection or wishful thinking. You have conversations, and you are fully present. You listen to what is said and how it is said. You notice consistency and deviation. You ask questions that reveal rather than interrogate. And you integrate all of this automatically, without strain, without conscious effort. You make decisions with clear eyes, about who to trust, about what opportunities to pursue, about when to engage and when to walk away. Your choices are aligned with reality, not fantasy. And this creates a life that works, that has solid foundation, that is built on truth. You experience peace that was not available when you were constantly being blindsided. Not the false peace of ignorance, the real peace of seeing clearly and knowing you can handle what you see. You still encounter deception. You always will. But it does not devastate you anymore. It does not shock you. It does not make you question your entire judgment. You notice it. You verify it. You respond to it. And you move forward. And this is not the end of the journey. Mastery is not a destination. It is a practice. There are always deeper layers to learn, subtler tells to recognize, more complex situations to navigate. You will continue to refine, to practice, to learn from every interaction, to study your errors and your successes, to expand your database of patterns, to increase your accuracy year after year. And perhaps you will teach others. You will share what you have learned. You will help people move from innocence to awareness, to skill to mastery. You will contribute to a world where deception holds less power because more people see clearly. This is the invitation forward, to keep growing, to stay humble, to remain a student even as you become a master, to use your skills in service of truth and protection and authentic connection. You are no longer the person who was easily deceived. That version of you is gone, not forgotten, but transformed. You have trained your brain. You have upgraded your perception. You have built the infrastructure that makes accuracy sustainable. You have integrated ethics that keep power aligned with values. You move through life with eyes wide open and heart protected. Not closed, not hardened, protected, boundaried, wise. You detect the lies. Not all of them. Not with perfect accuracy, but with enough reliability to protect yourself and the people you love. You recognize the patterns in speech and movement and story structure and emotional display, in what is said and what is omitted, in consistency and deviation. You choose wisely, not perfectly, but with dramatically better judgment than before, with discernment that comes from seeing reality instead of projection. This is who you are now, a person who sees clearly, who trusts carefully, who loves wisely, who builds a life based on truth. Welcome to your new identity. Welcome to seeing what others miss. Welcome to the clarity that comes from trained perception. You have arrived, and the journey continues, deeper, wiser, clearer, with every conversation, with every observation, with every choice to see truly instead of comfortably. This is mastery. This is transformation. This is you.